They came home smiling. Frank Morgan still had his airport neck pillow slung over one shoulder like a badge of comfort. Susan, his wife, carried 3 duty-free shopping bags and wore that heavy European perfume she always saved for special trips. They stood in front of the door of 1842 Sycamore Lane, what they still called our home, and waited for the deadbolt to click. It didn't. Frank jiggled the handle. Did Claire change the lock again? Susan frowned. Don't be ridiculous. Why would she? Then she tried her own key. Nothing. Frank grunted. Well, that's just great. Still standing on the porch with luggage at their feet, they peered through the window beside the front door. No furniture, no curtains, no familiar clutter of books or jackets, or Susan's porcelain angels on the mantel. The house wasn't messy. It was empty. And on the granite kitchen counter, just visible from where they stood, sat a single white sheet of paper. They didn't know it yet, but it read, "Surprise." A burden did this. My name is Claire Morgan. I'm 29 years old. I'm a licensed real estate agent in Columbus, Ohio. I'm someone who pays her bills on time, doesn't raise her voice, and still feels guilty for throwing away birthday cards, even the ones with no message inside. This house wasn't supposed to be a battlefield. It was supposed to be a gift. It had belonged to my grandmother, Eleanor Whitman, a woman who taught me how to prune roses and balance a checkbook in the same afternoon. She left it to me outright when she died. No conditions, no shared ownership, just a clean deed with my name on it. But that day, watching my parents return from their dream vacation on my dime, reaching for a door that would never open for them again, I didn't feel cruel. I felt calm, because I had finally done the one thing they never expected. I stopped asking to be loved. Why would a daughter do that to her own parents? That's what they'll ask. That's what I used to ask myself. But if you stay with me, I'll tell you what they didn't. And by the end, you might not ask that question anymore. I grew up in a beige rental house with creaky floors and a thermostat no one dared touch. My father, Frank Morgan, worked swing shifts at a local packaging plant. Every night he came home with the same tired line, "I could have made something of myself if I hadn't had a kid so young." He never said it to me directly. He didn't have to. My mother, Susan Morgan, kept track of every dollar like it was owed back to her someday. Even now, I remember the way she'd hand me new school shoes receipts still in the box and say, "Just don't grow out of them too fast this time." They never hit me. They never screamed. But everything I was given came with an invisible invoice. By the time I was old enough to understand what shame felt like, I'd already learned how to apologize for needing things. Food, space, attention. I became good at not asking. And then there was Eleanor Whitman, my grandmother. My mother's mother. Every other weekend, she'd pick me up in her old Buick and drive the 45 minutes to her house out in Westerville. She made grilled cheese with actual butter and let me sleep in the guest room with the floral sheets. She never talked about my parents, but she never asked me to explain them either. In her house, I wasn't too much. I wasn't a handful. I was just Claire. And somewhere between her rose garden and the back steps where we'd sit with lemonade, she planted something else in me, the quiet belief that I was worth more than just what I cost. When I turned 18, she helped me apply for scholarships. When I got accepted into a state university for business, Frank said I was pretending to be better than the rest of us. He didn't know I had 3 jobs lined up to make rent. I didn't ask them for a cent. I never expected them to come to graduation. But Eleanor came. She wore her navy blue coat and pearls, and when she hugged me after the ceremony, she whispered, "You built this yourself, Claire. Don't let anyone take it from you." Back then, I thought she meant my diploma. I didn't know she was talking about so much more. I never asked why my parents acted like love was something to be earned. But maybe the better question is, what happens to a daughter who spends her whole life trying to earn it? Eleanor passed away 3 weeks before my 25th birthday. A sudden heart attack in her kitchen next to the kettle she used to make chamomile tea every night. I didn't cry at the funeral, not because I wasn't grieving, but because I knew if I started I wouldn't stop, and I couldn't fall apart in front of Frank and Susan. They stood like statues the whole time, stiff and unreadable, like they were attending an event, not a loss. Then came the reading of the will. The attorney's voice was calm, too calm. To my granddaughter Claire Morgan, who has shown determination, responsibility, and grace. I leave my home at 1842 Sycamore Lane fully and solely. Frank's jaw clenched. Susan blinked like she'd misheard. The house was worth around $850,000 at the time. And it was mine. Outright. No shared family asset. No co-signing. Just me. My parents received a modest sum in cash. Within weeks, they had a new car and a flat-screen TV. The rest of their share vanished into what Susan called necessities. That's when the language started to shift. It wasn't Claire's house anymore. It was the family home. At first, it was little things. When we redo the kitchen, we should host a Thanksgiving this year. Then came design sketches taped to the fridge, Pinterest boards sent to my email. Frank talked about knocking down walls. Susan didn't like the paint I had chosen, said it made the living room feel cold. But I was the one paying the bills. Property tax, insurance, repairs. They didn't offer. They didn't ask. I was still in my 20s making 6 figures as a realtor working 12-hour days to keep up. But in their eyes, I was just playing house. A girl with keys to something they still believed should have been theirs. One night, Susan walked into the kitchen, put her hand on the new granite countertops and said, "Your grandmother always wanted this place to feel like home. For all of us." I nodded, but inside, a quiet question started to grow. If they never had to earn it, why did I always feel like I did? It started at Sunday dinner. Chicken over cooked wine, half-flat conversation stilted as usual when my father dropped it into the silence like it was no big deal. "We're finally going to Europe." I looked up from my plate. "You're serious?" Susan smiled without looking at me. 3 months. London, Rome, Paris, all the places we never got to see. Frank added, "We figure it's now or never. I wanted to be happy for them. I really did." Then came the follow-up. "We can use the equity in the house," Frank said, casually slicing into his chicken. I set my fork down. "You mean my house?" He didn't flinch. "It's the family home, Claire. Your grandmother would have wanted us to enjoy it together." Susan nodded. "Don't be selfish. You've got a good job, no kids, no husband. This house is just sitting here making money." I said no. I said it calmly, directly. But then I softened. I offered to help a little since I knew they couldn't afford it otherwise. They didn't fight me on that. They didn't need to. Before I knew it, I was covering their flights, their hotels, their rail passes. I spent hours researching affordable but comfortable options. And still, Susan complained. "The hotel in Florence is too far from the city center. We would have preferred something with a balcony. Claire, can you just book it all? It's easier that way." The day before they left, I overheard Susan on the phone with her sister. I wasn't eavesdropping, just walking past the living room on my way to the laundry. Her voice was light, even amused. "Of course Claire's paying. It's the least she can do considering we let her keep the house." Let me keep the house. That sentence sat with me longer than I expected. Longer than it should have. Because some part of me, some raw, unhealed part, still wanted to believe they saw me as more than a bank account with feelings. That maybe deep down they still saw me as their daughter. They didn't, but I didn't know that yet. Not until the call. It was a Tuesday in mid-June. Warm outside, but inside the house something had gone cold. I had just finished showing a mid-century home across town and came back to find the kitchen sink still leaking. The drip had worsened, eating into the cabinet wood. Frank had installed that faucet himself last year. One of the few things he'd bothered to handle. I needed the warranty and I needed it fast, so I called. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Yeah. Hey, quick question, do you remember where you put the paperwork for the kitchen faucet?" "It's leaking again." He sighed. "In the den. 2nd drawer. Under kitchen. Why can't this wait till we're back? Because water is literally pooling under the sink." A beat passed. "We're about to head to dinner near the Eiffel Tower." "That sounds nice," I said, forcing something like a smile. "Enjoy." Yeah. The line clicked but didn't disconnect. I should have ended it there, but I didn't. I don't know why. Maybe some instinct kept my finger hovering. Some part of me that knew without knowing. Then I heard Susan's voice faint but clear. "Who was that?" Frank answered, already bored. "Claire. Complaining. Again." They laughed. I didn't. Something about the sink, he added, his voice now crisp in the open air. She finds problems with everything. I don't know why your mother ever left her that house. We're her parents. It should have gone to us. We'll deal with it when we're back. That place is our retirement plan, whether she sees it or not. I sat frozen. She's always been a burden, Frank said, and I felt it like the floor dropped out from under me. So easy to guilt her into things, Susan said. Remember how fast she agreed to pay for this trip? I just had to say family a few times. Give it time, Frank added. She'll sign the house over. She wants our approval too badly not to. They laughed again. I started recording. If she resists, Susan said, we start bringing up medical bills, nursing homes. Emotional pressure works better than logic. Worst case, Frank said, we're already living there. Possession is 9/10 of the law. My hand was shaking. When we get back, I want the master bedroom, he said, as if claiming territory. And she's looking at buying a second property? Susan scoffed. She should be helping us, not building her empire. I sat there for 15 minutes listening. By the time the call finally dropped, I wasn't Claire anymore. Not their daughter, not their safety net. I was someone else entirely. Someone who knew the truth and couldn't unknow it. And the worst part. This hadn't started in Paris. It had started years ago. I didn't cry right away. Instead, I stood in the middle of the kitchen staring at the spot on the cabinet where the water had darkened the wood grain and wondered how long it had been rotting beneath the surface. The sink. The house. Me. That night I didn't sleep. I listened to the recording again. Not just the words, but the tone, the practiced laughter, the confidence in my obedience. It wasn't a slip of the tongue, it was a strategy, one they'd been refining for years. The next morning, I called in sick. I told the office I had the flu. I think part of me believed it. My body felt sick, but the infection wasn't viral, it was something older. On the second day, I called Patricia Winters, a real estate attorney I'd worked with in the past. Clear-eyed, blunt, no time for nonsense. I told her everything. The inheritance, the years of quiet pressure, the phone call. The deed is in your name, she asked. Yes. No co-owners, no liens. I've paid all the bills, alone. Then legally, Claire, they have no claim. You allowed them to live there, but that doesn't entitle them to ownership. What about, because they're my parents? You're not legally required to house your parents, she said without even a pause. Especially not manipulative ones. It felt like someone had unhooked a stone from my chest. Later that afternoon, I sat on the floor of the guest room, my room still, and opened a shoebox of old papers. Letters, mostly. Things my grandmother Helen had written me over the years. I found one I hadn't remembered folded into a greeting card with watercolor violets on the front. It was dated 4 weeks before she died. My dearest Claire, I know this house won't protect you from everything, but it will give you ground to stand on when others try to shake it. Your parents, my son included, have always looked for shortcuts. You never did. That's why the house is yours. Because I trust you to live in it, not just own it. Love, always, Grandma Helen. I didn't know I was crying until the words blurred. I clutched the letter like it could steady me. They had called me a burden. But Helen had seen something else. The rest of the week passed in a sort of sharp quiet. I opened a new bank account, reserved a short-term furnished rental 2 hours away, called a discreet real estate colleague and told him I wanted to sell fast privately, no signs, no open houses. He asked if I was running from something. No, I said, not entirely believing it. I'm just ready to stop pretending this is still a home. That night, I made a spreadsheet of every item in the house. Furniture, art, documents. I categorized what was mine, what was my grandmother's, and what was theirs. I didn't keep a single thing in the gray zone. It had taken me years to realize the price of doubt. I wasn't about to pay it again. The house emptied in stages. I boxed up my belongings first, quietly, methodically. The movers came early on a Tuesday. I didn't watch them lift the couch I'd picked out with my first commission bonus. I didn't stand in the garden while they dug up the hydrangeas I'd planted in Helen's honor and transferred them to pots for the new place. I just made sure everything went to the right truck. My parents' belongings, what little they had, went into labeled boxes and plastic tubs, each carefully documented. I rented a storage unit in their name, 6 months paid in advance. The access code was emailed to their hotel in Rome. I left nothing ambiguous. The house sold faster than I expected. Marcus, my colleague, found a corporate buyer relocating from San Diego. He paid cash, didn't haggle, and asked no questions. The closing was set for midweek 3 days before my parents were due to return. It was just enough time. On the final morning, I stood alone in the living room. Everything echoed. My footsteps, my breath, my grandmother's voice in memory. In the kitchen, I placed a single note on the counter where we used to bake holiday cookies. Surprise! A burden did this. Then I left the key on the hook by the door, locked it from the inside, stepped out through the back patio, and walked away. That same afternoon, I turned in my old phone at the carrier store, disconnected my number, and left my email behind. Everything traceable stopped there. For the first time in years, I was unreachable. 3 days later, they came back. I don't know exactly how they reacted when their key didn't fit. But I know what the voicemail said. "Claire, what the hell is going on? We just got here and our stuff is gone. The locks are changed. Call us immediately." The second voicemail an hour later was sharper. More clipped. "This is not funny. You better explain yourself. Now." By the fifth message, my mother had shifted tone soft syrupy the way she always sounded when she needed something. "We're worried about you, sweetie. Please just let us know you're okay." I didn't answer. Instead, I forwarded the recordings to Patricia. "Let me know if any of this could be used against me," I typed. A few minutes later, her reply came back. "You're fine. They have no legal standing and you've handled this with remarkable restraint. Hold your ground." But it wasn't just legal ground I was holding. It was something quieter, older. Every room in that house had once whispered a version of "you owe them." Now, for the first time, the only voice left in my life was mine. Still, there was one thing I hadn't planned for. They didn't take silence well. The voicemails kept coming urgent, furious, weepy cycling like clockwork through every tool they had ever used to pull me back. By day 5, the tone had turned. "You sold our home," my father hissed into the receiver. "You had no right. We're talking to a lawyer." But that word "our" still clung like mold to everything they said. The house had never been theirs. Not on paper. Not in Grandma Helen's will. Not in any version of the truth that mattered. They had convinced themselves of ownership through proximity, not responsibility. And now they were trying to reclaim it the only way they knew how: guilt first, then fear. I didn't listen to every message, just enough to stay ahead. I heard when they tried showing up at my old office. Jamie, my assistant, texted me, "Your parents are here. They're making a scene. Boss just asked them to leave." I called the office line 5 minutes later, ready to do damage control. But Vanessa, my boss, met me with calm. "They accused you of fraud," she said flatly. "Said you stole their home." I held my breath. "They're not welcome here again," she continued. "We flagged them. Take whatever time you need." I swallowed the knot in my throat. Vanessa wasn't just protecting her business, she was protecting me, and I hadn't known how much I needed that until it happened. A week passed, then 2, and then the final card arrived in email. Long, wordy, meant to look composed but seething between the lines. They'd heard from a neighbor that I had moved. They hoped I was in a place to reconsider. They forgave me. But they also expected me to use the sale proceeds to buy a new property, one we can all share together as a family. It was always that word they used, like rope family. Always wielded with conditions, never grace. I didn't reply. Instead, I sent the message to Patricia. Her response was even shorter this time. "They're testing you. Don't answer. This is their pattern: press retreat, then press harder." She was right, and the old me might have folded, might have taken their moment of forgiveness as a last thread of belonging, but I didn't need their version of family anymore. What I didn't know, what none of us saw coming, was how far they'd go when they realized I meant it, and that they'd return not with lawyers, but with something worse, a plan to show up in person again. Only this time I wouldn't be the one afraid of losing control. The question now wasn't if they'd confront me. It was, What would they do when the only power left to them was a performance? It was Rachel, my former neighbor, who called. Claire, I thought you should know your parents are parked in front of the house, just sitting there, watching. My breath caught. The new owners, they're out of town. Business trip, I think. But your parents? They haven't moved in an hour. I thanked her. My voice was steady, but my palms were damp. That same evening, the message came. Blocked number. A voice I'd known my whole life. We need to talk. Tomorrow. 10 a.m., the coffee shop on Walnut. If you don't come, we'll go back to your office. This time we won't be quiet. He didn't wait for my answer. I called Patricia. They're threatening to come to my work. You don't owe them a meeting, she said. You have grounds for a restraining order. I know, I said, but I want to face them. Just once. On my terms. The next morning I arrived 15 minutes late. Deliberately. The Daily Cup was busy as always. I picked it for that reason, public neutral familiar. The owner, Greg, had been one of my first clients. I saw them before they saw me. My mother's hair had grayed at the roots. My father's hands clenched around a half-drunk coffee cup. They looked older. Not wiser, just older. I walked over slowly, sat down without greeting, placed my phone on the table between us, screen lit. My mother's eyes flicked toward it. Recording, she asked. Protection, I replied. You're our daughter, Claire, my father snapped. Not an adversary. And yet you threatened my job. They blinked. The mask cracked. Let's get to it, I continued. What do you want? My mother opened her purse, pulled out a printout of the deed transfer. You sold it. Without even telling us. It wasn't your house. We lived there, my father said. We made it a home. You occupied it, I corrected. You replaced my furniture, repainted my walls, and undermined every decision I made in my own space. We were family. No, I said quietly. You were trespassers with keys. He stood abruptly, the chair scraping. I didn't flinch. You think this makes you strong? His voice was low, trembling. You think this is winning? I think this is peace. My mother's eyes shone with tears she hadn't earned. We didn't mean what we said. That phone call you misunderstood. I pressed play. Her own voice echoed from the recording. She's been a burden from the start. I stopped it after 10 seconds. Enough. They were pale now, smaller. You didn't misstep, I said. You revealed yourselves. That's the difference. What now? My mother whispered. What happens to us? You find another daughter, I said, then stood up, walked out. The coffee shop's bell chimed behind me like punctuation. They didn't follow. They wouldn't. And if they did, they'd find that the door no longer opened the way it once had. Not because I changed the locks, but because I changed the person behind them. It's been nearly a year since I sold the house on Sycamore Street. The one with the chipped blue shutters and the garden that bloomed in late April, where my grandmother once taught me the names of things that stayed rooted even in storms. My new life is quieter, not empty, just quieter. I live in a townhouse in a town with no old memories. The furniture is simple, the walls bare by choice. No family photos, no inherited clocks that never kept the right time. Each morning I make my coffee and sit by the window. Watch the light move across the floor like it belongs there. Work is steady, fulfilling even. I help people, especially women, buy their first homes. I tell them the things no one told me. That ownership isn't just about land or keys. It's about voice, boundaries, dignity. One young woman cried after closing. No one ever believed I could own something she said. I believe it now, I told her. I still see Dr. Palmer once a month. Sometimes we talk about finances, sometimes about silence. You've been unusually still, she said during our last session. Still isn't the same as stuck, I said, and it's true. The weight that once knotted itself around my spine, the need to be accepted by people who only loved me when I was useful, has loosened. Not disappeared, but loosened. There were emails, of course, after that coffee shop meeting. Long, erratic paragraphs, accusations laced with sugar. My father claimed I humiliated them. My mother called it an unfortunate misunderstanding that could still be mended. I didn't respond. I owe them nothing, not an explanation, not a window into my new address, not even anger. Only distance. Clean, deliberate distance. One afternoon in late spring, I returned to the cemetery. Just me and a folded lawn chair and a paper bag of peonies. "Hi, Gran," I said, settling beside her. The stone was weathered now, but the name beneath it was still clear. "I think I finally understand what you meant in that letter I said aloud. About value, and choosing who gets to define it." I sat there for nearly an hour. No tears this time. Just space. As I stood to leave, I placed one hand lightly on the headstone, a gesture that felt more like grounding than goodbye. Back at home, I opened the last box I had yet to unpack. Inside, an old photograph, me and Gran sitting cross-legged on her porch, both of us grinning faces full of summer. I framed it, set it on my windowsill. It's the only family picture I keep out. Everything else I keep where it belongs. Behind me, but not buried, not forgotten, just uncarried. If you've ever had to let go just to stand up, I'm still listening.